Now that you know how to create your webinar, in video 8, in this video, you get to learn how to set up your webinar and your webinar pages. To get the information that you need to send to your webinar attendees, it's actually a very easy thing to do. Now, when we created our webinar, what happened was GoToWebinar actually sends you an email with that information. If you didn't get that email, then you will notice that it says email me the invitation. So since it has emailed me the invitation, all I have to do is go to my email box, click on GoToWebinar, and as you can see here, it says pre-launch webinar, register now. Register now at this location. So what you can do is all you need is this link here. So you right click it, click on copy link address. And if I go to this page, you will see that you can actually register for the webinar. All you have to do is include your first name, last name, and so forth. And when you create your webinar, remember that you saw all this stuff. You can actually make it so people don't have to fill out all this information. If you really don't need people's city, state, and all that stuff, then I would recommend that you remove that information and keep it simple to first name, last name, and email address. Now, as you know, now that you can see that it's so easy to get people to sign up, let's talk about how to use the webinar. Fortunately, at GoToWebinar.com, GoToWebinar gives you the ability to actually go into the webinar and practice. So what you can do is you can click on practice, and as you can see here, the software is joining the webinar. So you can practice beforehand before you go live, which is a great thing about GoToWebinar. I would definitely say that it would be wise for you to rehearse your webinar before you actually launch your webinar. Alright, so what we're going to do is follow these instructions and click on Run. And within a few minutes we should be able to see the webinar itself.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, web events made easy. Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizer.
So as you can see here, this is what the GoToWebinar software looks like. Now, unfortunately, I just recorded the GoToWebinar video just now, but Camtasia did not pick up on it, so what we're looking at right now are screenshots. So what I'm going to do now is just go through each screenshot and explain to you which one means what. So this is what you see when you're in practice mode. Once you start your webinar in practice mode, this is what you're going to see. So as you can see, it's very, very simple to use, and you don't really need to be tech savvy in order to use it. The second screenshot here is what happens is when you click the application button. So if I go back here, you'll notice it says application here. If you click on this drop down menu, you will see this following stuff here. This will enable you to pick and choose a specific window that you want to show. Let's say, for example, that I want to show Firefox. Then what I can do is I can click on this here, and what people will see is the Firefox and what I'm looking at inside of my web browser. Now, what people are going to see is totally different than what you are seeing right now. What they're going to be seeing is, a chat room and what you're looking at. The next slide here shows how many attendees you have. So as you can see, I'm the only attendee right now, so you only see one attendee here. Right below that, you're going to see questions and see how many questions people have, how many questions you have answered, and so forth. You're also going to see how many people have their hands raised. Let's say, for example, that you're talking throughout the webinar and somebody raises their hand because they have a question. Well, what the person sees is totally different than what you see. However, when they raise their hand, you're going to see who raises their hand, and then you might be able to stop the webinar and answer the person's question. But it might be a good thing to have everybody hold their questions to the end of the webinar. That way you're not interrupted and you don't get sidetracked, because it's easy to get sidetracked when you're holding a webinar. Next slide here shows what people see. Because you can't necessarily see what the viewers are seeing, sometimes you can have technical difficulties while you're recording your webinar. You want to be able to see what the audience views. Fortunately for you at GoToWebinar, they do provide you with a feature, as you can see here, and you can see that we're looking at the pre-launch webinar page through Firefox. The second tab shows you how many attendees are showing or visiting and viewing your webinar, who they are, what their names are, and so forth. So you can mute somebody if you want to, or you can invite other people. The second tab, as you can see here, is for audio. You have two choices. You can either use a phone or you can use mic and speakers. Preferably, I like to use the microphone when I do webinars, preferably because it's just easier, it's connected to the computer, and so forth. And of course, you can deal with the audio setup. That's not really an issue here. The next thing, as you can see here, you have a highlight. If you click on this button here that looks like a highlight button, that will allow you to either write on the screen. As you can see here, I've drawn a square box with a smiley face in it. That will allow you to basically write on your screen. So there's a number of ways that you can go about. You can have pen, pencils, red marks, things like that. Now, you do want to keep in mind, though, that if you are dealing with, let's say, 100 or 200 people viewing your webinar, then in that case, you got to realize that using all these fancy features can create or can make your webinar crash, and you definitely don't want to do that.